That being said, we still have a long way to go to get back to more prosperous times. We have built the foundation, starting with more revenue through Watson Island, and continue to fight for changes in provincial legislation which hamper our community from collecting much-needed tax revenue. I feel we have developed a good working relationship with the port and solved previous issues. I know in this position, you will never make everyone happy all the time, but I feel that our mayor and existing council team has collectively gained a lot of traction by working well together and moving this town forward. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Nick Adey. Thanks for coming out, and thanks to the organizers for providing us with this opportunity to express our ideas. I believe the work of the City Council is to listen, to learn, to collaborate, and then take thoughtful action. One of its most important roles is to act as a bridge between community members, community groups, business, labor, First Nations, and different levels of government. The work that a council does can only be effective if it's done through collaboration. If elected, I'll focus on 5 priorities. Economic diversification. We need to avoid placing too many eggs in too few baskets. I'm an optimist, and I think with continued expansion at the port, new opportunities on Ridley Island, and now Watson Island, we're on the right track. Affordability. We need to continue working to address poverty and affordability issues. We've seen property values and rents increase significantly over the past few years, and we need to be mindful that the most vulnerable among us struggle when this happens. Environmental sustainability. This is a global issue, but many initiatives are possible on a local level. I believe there is an urgent need to transition to a greener way of life so that our children can grow in a healthier world. Quality of life. It's important to recognize and strive to improve the amenities and opportunities that contribute to enjoyment of life and a sense of belonging. For this reason, I'm in support of many of the ideas in the redesigned Prince Rupert initiative. I also believe we need to continue working to enhance our support for arts and recreation. And finally, continuity. I recognize the good work that has already been done in terms of vision and planning through the Hayes 2.0 initiatives. We don't have to start from scratch. We just have to start from where we are. I'm excited by where we are now as a community, and I look forward to contributing to a brighter future. Thank you.
First of all, I'd like to acknowledge that we are holding this gathering on the traditional lands of the 9 allied tribes with Loch Alarms and Metlakatla. And I would like to thank everyone for coming out today. It's very inspiring to see such passionate community members coming out to get involved and hear what the candidates have to say when it comes to the future of our community. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Reed Skelton-Morvan. I was a director of the Prince Rupert and District Chamber of Commerce, as well as a public relations officer of the Prince Rupert Toastmasters Club. As a stepfather and local business owner of Tsimshian and Nisga'a descent, I am humbled by the support I've received from our community. And I am super excited and honored to have the opportunity to serve you. In the early 2000s, while Prince Rupert was brought to its economic needs, through the closure of the pulp mill, the fishing industry taking a toll, and the financial crisis that followed, I was growing up in BC housing near McKay Street with my mother and brother. I've experienced firsthand what economic hardship is like, and the work and dedication it takes to rise above one's circumstances. Much like how Prince Rupert has risen above its previous economic standing and has become now the fastest growing port city in the world, all thanks to hard work and passion of our tight-knit and resilient community and its volunteers. But we can't stop now. In such a critical time of our city's progress, we need new and innovative ideas and an entrepreneurial perspective at the council table. As a local entrepreneur and innovator, I will bring additional forward-thinking perspectives to the decisions and challenges we face together as a community. I'm running for City Council in support of positive and inclusive collaboration with the current mayor and councillors, as well as the citizens and the region to see through to the Hayes 2.0 vision for Prince Rupert. Let's build a vibrant community that's forward-thinking, economically and ecologically sustainable, and leave a legacy we are proud to hand our children and many generations to come. Thank you.
I couldn't agree anymore. It's hard to believe that it's been nearly 4 years since the last election, And reflecting back, I'm really proud of the results and changes, as it's been mentioned before, that our team's been able to create together. But I'm not here tonight to promote our track record or to dwell on the past or to defend the status quo. I'm simply here to make a case for why I think I deserve another term on council. And first, this is my hometown. I was born and raised here. Many of you probably know me as the son of Brad and Janet Miro, maybe even the grandson of Garth and Judy. And for the last nearly 6 years, I've been working in Prince Rupert with the Gitmuk-Makanisqa Society, first as Economic Development Officer starting in 2013, before I was promoted to CEO in mid-2016. And my time with the local Nisqa has been focused on developing their social enterprises. And for those closest to me know that that is my absolute dream job. Before that, I was the grant writer at City Hall, probably best known for my work on the Cow Bay Marina. And in terms of my educational background, I've got an undergrad degree in international development, a graduate certificate in sustainable community development, and I'm currently working on turning that grad certificate into a master's degree. So long story short, that's the bullet point version of me. If I'm lucky enough to be reelected, my priority is to continue our work to fix the city's finances so that we can finally afford to invest in all of the assets that make our community livable. Whether that's a vibrant downtown, waterfront access, curbside recycling, all of the assets that really make a place a great place to live. And through all the tough times and budget cutbacks that our city's seen in the last 20 years, we've proven as a community that we are resilient. And so now it's finally time for us to turn the chapter to see how much we can grow. Thanks so much.
Well, I'd like to thank you to all the candidates for the opening statements, and we will move on to the questions. And Mr. Randhawa will be the first one. And your question is, as the sole shareholder of City West and with its recent launch of Watson Island Intermodal Trade and Logistic Park, our local government managed a significant commercial and industrial business interests. How effective is this strategy? Please explain your vision for the Prince Rupert economy and how it would be involved in such a city-owned assets.
Thank you, Michael, for your question. Local ownership is good when the decisions are made locally. Money stays in the community, jobs are created for our kids. City West is one of the most innovative, best-run business in Northwest BC. In fact, it's growing in value every year. It's a generous corporate citizen and pays the city a significant dividend on an annual basis. The 60 local jobs it represents today would shrink to 10 or less if we sold to one of the big telecommunication companies. Let's talk about Watson Island. Because Prince Rupert is the sole owner of Legacy, it made it possible for us to seize new opportunities very efficiently. Watson Island used to cost the city about $90,000 per month in maintenance payments. Now, Watson Island is ready to start earning property taxes again. The promotion of this industrial park and the negotiations that resulted in its first tenant would not have been possible if we were working through a third party. Now, I want to see more industries becoming established at Watson Island as quickly as possible. Let's be clear, it's unusual for a municipality to own businesses, especially industrial businesses like Watson Island. But Prince Rupert is an exceptional situation. We inherited a city-owned utility that has embraced the internet age, profitability, and with tangible benefits to our economy.
My question is directed at Ms. Carlson. Weigh the city's success at joining and profiting from partnerships with governments, industry-related groups, and other bodies. As a councillor, what such alliances would you seek to establish, reinforce, or dissolve for maximum benefit?
I'm Charmaine Carlson. So as for the government, the transportation is a key issue lately. A lot of 3rd Avenue, 2nd Avenue incidents. And I view things as when you, just like you go into my restaurant, try and keep it clean. It's what people perceive. We're a tourist town. We have family here. We need to put safety first, including our visitors. So I would petition the Ministry of Transportation to put beepers, and just like they have in Vancouver with countdowns, everything on. And I think as for the services for many different things from our government, I'm not acquainted with all the government things, but it all links to us. Because we're at the bottom, you have to move up to get what you ask for. So another thing, I am in the fishing industry. I had a conversation last week with a visitor from Prince Rupert, and they were just a tourist. They had fisheries stop them and ask them for a fishing license. I've heard many different things. I would ask to petition a Department of Fisheries to do a code of ethics when they're dealing with our visitors that come to Rupert. I know we're in a sports fishing industry. It's a sensitive area, but there is a code of ethics that goes with our commercial fishermen, our sports fishermen, and our visitors. And on the industry side, I'm an entrepreneur too, and I'm very visionary. I like making things happen. So I would petition the Port AltaGas to make a grant to redesign Prince Rupert in our downtown area to give it a facelift every year. Thanks.
Ms. Dancer, as a sole shareholder of City West, and with its recent launch of the Watson Island Intermodal Trade and Logistics Park, our local government manages significant commercial and industrial business interests. How effective is this strategy? Explain your vision for Prince Rupert's economy and how it would involve such city-owned assets.
Thank you, Mr. Armstrong. I actually recently learned that we own City West, which I think is pretty phenomenal. And I liked hearing that it's moving forward into fiber optic cables and expanding the capacity that the North has for going into the next digital age. Recently, I participated in a digital sovereignty for Indigenous Peoples Forum, and it's been identified that technology and innovation in the tech center is a unifying concept where there's just opportunity for us to work together and collaborate to build a new industry that we can all get behind and support. Having City West and as a city asset provides local jobs such as the 911 dispatch for the fire hall, which is pretty incredible. It makes the response time so much faster, and we get those emergency services right away, which is, of course, very necessary. So one of the things would be to try and get that dispatch also for our BC ambulance services as well as our RCMP. Thank you.
Mr. Cunningham, how would you characterize the city's relation with the federally chartered Port of Prince Rupert, recognizing a legislative constraints like the cap imposed by the BC Ports Property Tax Act? What levers would you use to ensure the port complies to local standards of environmental sustainability, civic responsibility, and participation in economic development?
Thank you, Michael. I would say the relationship between the City of Prince Rupert and the Port of Prince Rupert is greatly improved under this mayor and council. We inherited a broken relationship, I would say, and I was part of that to begin with. We came to a mutual agreement that included the settling of the PILT, payment in lieu of taxes, that resulted in the city receiving over $5 million for the years 2013 to 2015, and a further $1.5 million to be matched by the city for a jointly administrated infrastructure fund. Part of this agreement is opening up a dialogue to address issues that are common to both parties. The important part is we are communicating on these issues that can be affected by the port in our community. As councillors, we attend public forums on port projects to let them know the community's concerns and views, which was an example of that didn't happening with the pellet plant. The city wasn't engaged at all. The Port of Prince Rupert is a federal entity and as such is not subject to the city's bylaws. Having an open dialogue with the City of Prince Rupert is a step to solving issues on economic development, environmental sustainability, and civic responsibility. As for the BC Ports Property Act tax, this is something Mayor and Council have been diligently working towards ending. This is strictly a provincial issue, it's not a port issue, and the Mayor now heads part of a consortium of port cities to solve it. He's spent a lot of time with the other port cities that are greatly affected by this. And we hope this will be solved in the near future. Thank you.
Mr. Niche, how important from an economic perspective is the City of Prince Rupert's agreement with the District of Port Edward to share tax proceeds from industrial tenants of Ridley Island? What would you do to build a more mutually beneficial relationship between the two communities?
The Ridley Island tax sharing agreement with Port Edward made sense in 1981 when they were impacted by the pulp mill but did not receive benefit. But the mill has been closed for 18 years and we have continued to pay as though it has been open, paying approximately 25% of Port Ed's budget. Here is an eye-opening way to explain it using the 2016 census population numbers. So we paid $800,000 this year to Ridley, from Ridley taxes, which is 17%, to Port Ed. And our portion would have been $3.9 million at 83%. But what this really translates to, and kind of some eye-opening numbers are, Prince Rupert's population of 12,687 people, it works out to $307 per person that we are getting from Ridley Island. For Port Edward, at 467 people, they are receiving $1,713 per person. So there is no wonder that they do not wish to renegotiate. The irony is their municipal slogan is working together as one, but yet do not contribute to the things like the Performing Arts Center, police station, airport ferry, library, parks, garbage dump, etc. We had a temporary 2-year agreement for shared services, so they obviously agreed that they should contribute at one point. So basically they are a neighborhood 10 minutes away, they work here, shop here, play here, but their council feels no need to contribute. I think it is time to solve this. Maybe we should just tear off the bandage and think amalgamation instead. It would be cheaper for us and we could be equal, truly working together as one. This agreement is outdated and it's time for a reboot.
Mr. 80, what ought to be the city's highest priorities for civic infrastructure repair, replacement, and enhancement? What strategies could you champion on City Council to ensure that these priorities are addressed effectively?
Well, I think the priority has to be based first on those things that directly affect people's health. After that, we have to follow legal requirements, and everything else comes after that. So with regard to people's health, the city has already identified water supply as a priority, and work is underway on that issue. Expansion of the landfill and rebuilding our wastewater infrastructure must follow based on legal requirements. The wastewater renewal is a big project because it means systematically replacing our road system because you have to get to the pipes to twin them and they run under all the roads. So it's expensive, but it does carry the added benefit that we'll be able to improve our roads, and we can all dream of driving from Seal Cove to Alpine Drive without hitting a pothole. In all of this, the city needs to continue pursuing funding assistance from other levels of government so that we will be better able to pay our share. And we need to obviously take advantage of the projects like Watson Island, which are going to give us tax revenues that don't mean raising property taxes and business taxes to get there. So we need to keep working on this. It's a long-term project, but I think that there's a sequence and a vision for how it might be done.
Mr. Reed Skelton Morvan, weigh the city's success at joining and profiting from partnership with governments, industry-related groups, and other bodies. As a councillor, what such alliances would you seek to establish, reinforce, or dissolve for maximum benefit?
Awesome. Thank you very much, Michael. I think the city's success at forming strategic partnerships has proven to bring results. For example, things like the Rushbrook Trail, the Cow Bay Marina, and repaving and maintenance of McBride, 2nd Avenue, and Park Avenue roads were all due to strategic partnerships with various organizations and bodies of government. I think increasing our efforts in maintaining these partnerships is crucial in the success in rectifying a lot of the infrastructure challenges we face. Some of the partnerships, though, I'd like to hone in on and maintain would be the partnership with the Port of Prince Rupert, DP World, the provincial and federal governments. Some new partnerships would be seeking out new and sustainable industry partners and potential leaseholders for the remaining 87% of Watson Island. I truly and firmly believe that this will be a key point in our success in the future of generating newfound revenue through the Prince Rupert Legacy Incorporated, which is a sub-corporation that allows us to generate the lease revenue for the space on locations like Watson Island rather than focusing on just the tax revenue. Another partnership to hold in on would be the Northwest Resource Benefits Alliance, which could be another key player in forming new prosperity in the region as a whole. And just on a side note, is that the fishing has kind of hit an all-time low, and we definitely have to look to new and sustainable solutions for the future. And I think that the Northwest Resource Benefits Alliance is kind of paving the way for us in that regard, where green energy projects as well as future projects in the future that we can look into.
Mr. Moreau, the high number of vacant and under-maintained commercial buildings, including city-owned properties, such as the historic Veal Rail Station, is one of Prince Rupert's most prominent features. As a city councillor, describe plans you would advance to address the visible decay and dereliction within the local commercial sector.
Thanks very much for the question. I mean, it's no secret all of these vacant buildings, vacant lots, deteriorated buildings, they're a symptom of a much larger problem. Particularly in downtown core, all across America, the growth of online retail is killing brick and mortar. In Prince Rupert, we also have a unique situation where the growth in port-related jobs and the competition for skilled labor is creating a serious problem where even successful businesses are now closing because they're having problems recruiting and retaining staff. The good news for us, though, is because it's a problem that's being experienced in a lot of other places, there's also a lot of examples for us to learn from and apply best practices. And that's been our focus on the city's Small Business Advisory Committee, which I've been the chair of for the last 2 years. We recognize that we don't need to reinvent the wheel to get a lot of these buildings fixed up. Our committee back in April presented a detailed action plan to council that included ideas like tax exemptions for building owners that fix up their properties or build on vacant lots, improving our facade improvement grant to give businesses an added incentive to fix out their storefronts, and strengthening bylaw enforcement as well. So my plan specifically as city councilor would be to continue pursuing those recommendations that the committee put to council to address this problem. And specifically on a more personal level, I would really like to see a downtown revitalization action plan that includes things like more public gathering spaces and housing in our downtown, because we know from our city planner, he loves to use the slogan, getting more feet on the street is the key to revitalizing our downtown. So that would be my strategy.
And now we are on to section 2. Now for first question, Mr. Rondawa. How effective is the city's support of arts, culture, and recreation, including its funding of civic institutions like the library, museum, performing arts center? Though community enhancement grants, as a city councillor, what would you do to address the level of support for arts, culture, and recreation initiatives, and the process by which funding priorities are set?
Thanks, David, for your question. Our Performing Arts Center is the best theatre outside the Lower Mainland. The Museum of Northern BC is a world-class institution. Our public library is thriving with circulation numbers and visitors count you would find in a much larger community. These institutions simply would not exist without support from the city of Prince Rupert. Each volunteer-led initiative that benefit from community enhancement grants contributes to the quality of life in our city. If I'm elected, I will dedicate myself to building new sources of revenue that will allow us to budget more generously for the institutions that make Prince Rupert a remarkable place to live. As more industrial tenants sign on to Watts Island Industrial Park, the city will be better able to balance its priorities of infrastructure upgrades with funding for arts, culture, and recreation. Through our improved relations with the Port Authority, we have created a committee that is prioritizing projects for joint funding. In the future, some of these projects may target priorities like the ones you asked about. Meanwhile, I think it's possible to do a better job providing longer-term funding certainty for these institutions. This is a good system. It allows us better planning for us. So I will support for this one.
Thank you, Mr. Randawa. And now Ms. Carlson. An important facet of Prince Rupert's cultural identity is the high proportion of Indigenous residents. Compared to Canadian averages and its proximity to First Nation communities like Metlakatla and Lac Swallam, how would your leadership on City Council promote reconciliation between Indigenous and non-Indigenous people?
My business has 25 employees. All of them are Aboriginal except for 3. So this community is built around Aboriginal people. I work with the bands, I work with my employees. I have a great many friends in the bands as chiefs, etc. I think it is embedded in this community that we work with the Aboriginal people. This is their lands. They have the right for all of their beautiful totem poles. It adds character. I've been on many committees, and I often wonder when I sit down going, where are my Aboriginal friends? We should ask them to join, be part of this whole community because they're every part of this community. Half of the fishermen that I deal with are Aboriginal. The plants I deal with now are Aboriginal. They are every part of this community, and I think they should be invited on every level of building the community. Thank you.
Miss Dancer has the same question. I'll repeat it. An important facet of Prince Rupert's cultural identity is its high proportion of Indigenous residents compared to other Canadian averages, and its proximity to First Nations communities like Metlakatla and Lac Swallam. How would your leadership on City Council promote reconciliation between Indigenous and non-Indigenous peoples?
One of the reasons that we decided to move to Prince Rupert was because of the rich First Nations culture that we saw here. And since moving, I've been truly blessed to experience so much of the beauty and the traditions that are so deep-rooted in this community. Like Charmaine, I think that there needs to be open invitations. I know that there has been a protocol developed somewhat in light of the LNG businesses that came to town. And so these need to be utilized in order to engage and welcome participation from the different nations that make up this community. Through that collaboration is how we will see true potential for Prince Rupert and for the region. And so it's of utmost importance that we reconcile and move forward as one. Thank you.
Now, Mr. Cunningham, 2017's Tent City on City Hall grounds sparked collaboration between the city and the province of BC to address homelessness in Prince Rupert. To what degree should the city be involved in alleviating the symptoms of poverty, and what policies would you propose to do so?
Thank you. I think poverty begins with homelessness, and I think it's important the city is involved in alleviating homelessness on the streets of Prince Rupert. Although this is a provincial responsibility, the city has to be a willing partner to come up with innovative ways to support affordable housing. The city's done this by rezoning, and a prime example of that is the new Trinity Recovery House, which is helping reduce homelessness on the streets. The city also helped set up the emergency shelter, winter shelter, with our own mayor going down there, rolling up his sleeves and actually washing floors and that. New development projects are now going to be contributing, if there's more than 3 units involved, they'll be contributing $1,000 per unit to future affordable housing. And thanks to collaboration not only with the province but with community and advocacy groups, we have a start. The policies the cities can bring forth are in the forms of rezoning and working closely with various advocacy groups to address the needs of homelessness as it becomes known. I participate in different groups, the Aboriginal Homeless Society and the Unemployment Action Society, that is a housing advocacy group. So I really think by eliminating homelessness, we're going to eliminate high police costs, waste of time downtown and things like that. And I think in the end it'll help us. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cunningham. And we have Sarah that would like to add something to it. So please go ahead.
So an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. That's a quote from Benjamin Franklin. And I believe that it is our duty as a city to provide information and assistance to those at risk. Housing is a human right, and we need to approach this through the city by implementing policies that it's our responsibility to support people who are at risk before they don't have a home anymore. I can only imagine how devastating that would be, and it ultimately will cost the city more, and that's not okay by me. And so we need to take a step forward in approaching homelessness by alleviating not only the symptoms, but the causes of poverty.
And back to you, Mr. Nish. Is the size of our municipal government proportional to the city's current obligation and future growth? How should the recent withdrawal of LNG proponents influence city budgets and plans for staffing?
In years past, our municipal workers, top to bottom, were stripped to minimum levels. This was necessary by previous councils to make their budgets work. Since this council secured $18 million in Legacy Corporation, we chose to increase staff for many reasons. This is about our future, having the ability to plan for major projects in all industries, not just LNG. The staff has allowed us to start moving forward, with examples being securing $11 million in water grants for our water pipe and dam. They have taken on huge challenges of demolishing the pulp mill and signing in excess of $75 million in a deal with Pembina on Watson Island. Without having the right amount of staff in place, these things would not have happened. Also, retention is a key part to success in a hyper economy. With port operators and Port Authority paying wages significantly higher, we need to be able to retain staff to keep the knowledge and continuity. Retention has become a problem for most employers recently, and succession planning is important. Also, is important. Also, in keeping the operations flowing, we have done this with really no negative impact to taxpayers. Lastly, part of this investment was to increase our mayor's wages to accommodate a full-time position, allowing him to work hard and lead us into a prosperous future for our community. We always need to be prepared and think 10 steps ahead. This has all happened with no tax increase the last 2 out of 3 years.
Mr. 80. 2017's tent city on City Hall grounds sparked collaboration between the city and the province of BC to address homelessness in Prince Rupert. To what degree should the city be involved in alleviating the symptoms of poverty, and what policies would you propose to do so?
Well, first of all, I think it's important to recognize it's not a new problem, but the 2017's tent city really kind of brought a focus to it. Poverty has complex causes, and addressing them requires intervention by all levels of government, including ours. So we do need to do our part. I defer to Barry's understanding of what's already been done. I've identified affordability as one of the things we need to focus on here in Prince Rupert because of the house values and rents, and it's made living beyond the means for many of our people. I welcome the initiatives to expand our pool of social housing as a way of housing those who occupied the tent city. When I was looking at this, I came across a project called a Housing First initiative, which establishes stable housing as the way to reduce other aspects of poverty. So in Medicine Hat, which is understandably a larger city, they placed 970 homeless individuals into homes. And what that did is it meant that the social services supports were able to get to them. And what that did is it resulted in 53% reduction in hospital stays for those people, 12% fewer emergency medical interactions, 32% reduction in emergency room visits, 58% fewer days in jail, and 24% fewer court appearances. So you see that there's a cost return here by treating homelessness and housing those people as the first priority.
Mr. Skelton-Morvan, an important facet of Prince Rupert's cultural identity is its high proportion of Indigenous residents compared to Canadian averages, and its proximity to First Nations communities like Metlakatla and Lac Williams. How would your leadership on City Council promote reconciliation between the Indigenous and non-Indigenous people?
Awesome. Thank you very much, Mr. Armstrong, for the question. This is actually a topic I'm very passionate about, being an Indigenous person myself. Reconciliation, by definition, is the restoration of friendly relations, and B, the action of making one view or belief compatible with another. My interpretation of this, as well as true reconciliation, is that we can all coexist, acknowledge and learn from a darker past, and together shape a brighter future, all in unity and in harmony. I firmly believe that the politics of division is something of the past, and we now need to take an inclusive, collaborative, and positive approach to making the best decisions for our community as well as our region as the North Coast as a whole. Our challenges and dreams of a brighter, greener, and more sustainable future are not in isolation, which is why it is imperative that we work together with surrounding coastal communities and regional municipalities to implement brighter and a more prosperous future through initiatives such as the Northwest Resource Benefits Alliance. And with the Northwest Resource Benefits Alliance, we can take it even further. As each community is moving towards green and sustainable solutions to some of their economic challenges, however, the startup costs and investments are too big of a sum for a single community to make alone. I firmly believe that if we can collaborate and invest in a sustainable future in the areas of green and sustainable energy projects like the Banks Island Wind Project or tidal energy projects on our very own coastal waters, as well as agriculture and agri-food investments to become a region that is not only independent and sustainable, but now other regions and sectors of the province and even the country are now dependent on our resources as well. And with Rupert being on a global stage, it is imperative we lead by example and not solely fall on external industrial projects with perhaps less green and a less sustainable approach. Thank you.
Mr. Miro, to what extent should transparency of local government be a city council priority, taking into account a frequency of closed council meetings and cancelled public sessions, as well as the recommendations of the BC Ombudsperson on open meetings? What can you do to improve residents' engagement with and awareness of city affairs?
Thanks very much for the question, Michael. I think, to state the obvious, it should definitely be a priority for us to especially in Prince Rupert's context, not only just improve engagement and awareness of city affairs, but also particularly the decisions that are made in camera. And Prince Rupert obviously has a unique circumstance in Watson Island. The basic decision to go in camera is around land, legal, or labor, and I think all of us new councillors in the last election were humbled by how complex of a file Watson Island is, and I'm sure any new councillors in this next election are going to be equally as humbled. But there are a few examples of initiatives that we've undertaken in the last few years that will hopefully open up this issue. So first is hiring a communications officer. Before that, the city didn't really have a social media presence, and whether we like it or not, that's where most people communicate these days. We've produced informational videos, we've done open houses, we've developed an app, we've got a new website. We've even experimented with participatory budgeting exercises, even though the turnout wasn't as good as it was tonight. And the mayor's presentation here a few months ago around our Haze 2.0 blueprint is also a really good example of how to increase awareness of cities' activities. But moving forward, I'd like to see a lot more than that. And there's two things in particular that I'd like to highlight that are currently under development. The first is that we've been working on an in-camera communications policy so that we can improve disclosures around decisions that are made in camera. We've also been working on how to improve the monthly committee of the whole meetings so that they can be more useful and engaging to the public. So that's, for me personally, a large priority. Thanks very much. I'll avoid the gong.
That concludes our second round of questions under the category of quality of life. Now, I know you've been seeing the board behind us, and there's been no interjections other than one so far. So we'll move to the questions that have been submitted by audience and people at home. Now, this format is going to be a slightly different. The question will be asked, and every candidate will have an opportunity to answer. So the first question: would you be publicly supportive if the prospect of LNG were to return to Prince Rupert? If no, are you supportive of the current or proposed propane export facilities, and why? We'll start with Mr. Randhawa.
Thank you, Leslie, for question. People of Prince Rupert needs a good paying jobs. City need taxes to fix infrastructure. I will support any encourage safe, responsible development of any industry which coexist with our current industries and values and meet all environmental conditions. We just have to make sure that any development does not harm the community and environment. We need good paying jobs to support infrastructure. Thank you.
Ditto.
No. Anyway, I would support the LNG or an export gas plant also in Prince Rupert if all the environmental criteria and along with the First Nations approvals would go through. That's a louder voice right there. So I would support it if all those things follow through. Ditto.
LNG is one of the cleanest energies. It's been researched and shown that it is one of the fuels that could really transition the world into renewables. I look at LNG as a bit of a responsibility for Canada to support the global transition from things like coal and other petrochemicals towards a lower carbon output in order to work towards having a green future for our children, for my son. LNG can actually be used again, which happens in the Atlantic coastal waters with some of the tankers there. And it's been internationally recognized as a non-renewable that the world's gotten behind when you look at how many countries have used it. I think that one of the hardships that this community faced when LNG was proposed here was that we didn't look at the model in Australia where they chose one appropriate place where the least environmental impact was going to be a result, and they got multiple, like all the industries, the opportunity was for them to collaborate on that one agreed upon space, and that's where they built one facility, but then you had multiple shareholders in it. And so if LNG were to come back, that would be the type of model that I'd like to see. So we'd have multiple international investors, which we could probably get lots of support from and see so many more of the quality of life infrastructure that we would like to have happen. Thank you.
I definitely support it. I think the city needs it. The city needs the jobs. I look at more as a regional thing than a global thing, although it's nice to see a global approach taken when it's because it is a very clean energy. I think the advantages to LNG and propane are too great for us to miss, because if we don't go ahead with it, somebody else is going to, like we've seen with Kitimat and that, and we're going to see a development probably go ahead in Kitimat that we might have had if it had been done properly. It's very important where it's placed, and it's very important how it's done. You know, there's different ways you can do LNG with hydroelectricity instead of gas turbines. It cuts down the emissions locally, which is more of my concern. You know, what we're putting in the air here to help other countries is not good with me. Like, we can make this a very clean energy and keep it clean here at the same time and benefit greatly from it. But it has to be done in consultation with the First Nations and done properly. And that's the biggest thing, responsibility. We have to hold any of these companies responsible for what they're doing in our town and our region, because the benefits from it are great, but at the same time, there's downfalls to it. So as long as it's done properly, I'm 100% for it. And these companies are making enough money to do it properly. Thank you.
I don't have a lot to say about this. I think that most of the points have been said already. I think that if done appropriately, I'm definitely in support of LNG projects. I think, just as Barry just said, if electric drives are used instead of turbines, I think that that can definitely help with our local emissions. And and propane. Well, I think propane is. I mean, I like to cook on the barbecue, so I think it's. I think we can definitely work with propane facilities, and yeah, I'm for both. Thank you.
I have to say I find this one a really hard one because it really sort of pits the need for jobs and revenue against a longer term view of where I think we need to go with the environment. I also think that the announcement that we think is coming out of Kitimat may change